invisible protocols, I think, are just like so awesome to look at when it comes to technology
I
and
love
like
that phrase. I hadn't
social
heard that phrase before. I
technology.
like that. Invisible protocols. That's fantastic. Yes.
And think about it in terms of like, no one thinks today about like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get from A to B? Like if you're trying to travel to someone's house 20 miles ago, like you're not like, or 20 miles away, you're not like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to spend like 45 minutes thinking about like, what is the route? How am I going to get there? It's like, we have just built a protocol that works for navigation, right? So it's like, how do we do that for education? How do we do that for being parents? How do we do that for health? How do we do that for like building projects and companies and like where we go? Like, I think there's still just so much to work on. And it's been really fun kind of shaking up those systems a bit at Edge City, where it's like you're in a space where it's like bets are off, like you have full agency to test out new ideas.
Yeah, I love it. And it's the combination of invisible protocols plus agency. Because if it's invisible protocols without agency, then you're running on rails that other people are building for you. But
Totally.
if you build having the agency and using this technology, whatever the technology is, to then build the invisible protocols for yourself that then you run on. So then you've made your life easier, but it's making your life easier in the way that you want to make it easier. And you're kind of putting your, you know, expanding your agency on the world rather than the world or others putting their agency on you.
Totally. Like I think there's just so many areas to think about this. And another big reason we're focused on building Edge City is like the social protocols around people's people's happiness, and sort of like depression and anxiety are like higher than they have ever been. And you're like, what the heck is going on? Like we have everything at our disposal. And the biggest solve that we have seen is like people actually being around like healthy environments of, something where they feel like they've got a purpose and many people around that they can socialize with, where they feel like there's shared values, like familiarity in some capacity. Like it just skyrockets how happy people are. And we've seen that at Edge. Like people have loved their time in these spaces. And we've got this one person who I just think is like a perfect example of someone who would live in, the more the idea of what an edge city is, like the idea of sort of living on the edge of what's normal, where everything is adopted, sooner than elsewhere, and it just feels like that is the norm. We've got this one guy, Mike Johnson, who has come to everything so far, and is totally a part of just the whole fabric of the experience, who's focused on looking at like what is the enlightenment blueprint, and how do we actually build a philosophy and science around enlightenment where every human in the world can just generally feel enlightened at all times. And like it's something that he is tracking after, and he finds Edge City to be this amazing place to study because he's like, people are just happier and healthier here because they have agency, because there are systems that can be like rethought and reimagined, and then taken elsewhere after the fact. But it's been cool seeing this idea of like, well, is the model of like therapy that we have today, one-on-one therapy, that we just like we thought was going to be the solve, right? We were like, if you just go to a therapist, you will cure your depression, and that hasn't quite worked. But we're not like
That's an
sitting there being like,
understatement,
okay,
saying it's not quite worked.
saying like, okay, that wasn't a system that we've built a massive industry around, that needs to be rethought, right? And like, how do we build towards that? And where are the spaces that we can build towards that? So we're just hopeful we can create kind of these environments where rethinking these systems that haven't worked for like human flourishing can be done.